Welcome to another episode of The Idiot, and my name is Ritvik Siruguri. The feeling of your stomach hurting when you get up in the morning, headaches, and a feeling of numbness when you're working, and being ceaselessly out of breath even when not exercising. This is a state we often find ourselves when we lose something close or something valuable, which played a very significant part of our lives. The idea of loss and failure is something we all run away from as it brings in discomfort. In this very sorry state of mind, one composer emerged, Johann Sebastian Bach. The first piece I had ever heard from him was his Mass in B minor, the final work of his, and the opening to it gave a very disenchanted appeal. Even though it was filled with lament, the work was graceful, and as a listener, you couldn't help but wonder where this is taking me. The provenance of his music comes from his love for God, Jesus. In Christianity, the relationship between God and humans is that we are all his children and God is our Father. A very personalized relationship, I must say. He looks after us all and tries to make sure we all are safe, no matter how miserable life may be. That's the way I feel when listening to his music. A feeling of comfort, even though I'm not really feeling good. There's some form of guidance available. Everything will be okay. Just don't worry and let life just continue on. Now, surprisingly, the composer, who is considered by all critics to be the greatest of all time, had his work forgotten. And if it weren't like composers like Felix Mendelssohn who revived his work, his music would be completely unknown and unheard of. Imagine that. That would be an interesting place to live in, if you ask me. Even though his music was so old, composers like the Beatles took inspiration from his Bourrée in E minor to make the song Blackbird from their White album. Many prog metal bands like Dream Theater and a lot of neoclassical music also takes huge inspiration from Bach. The whole idea of fugues is used extensively in metal music, and it is used as a way to create progression and development. There was a study I had encountered recently. Of course, I saw this in a YouTube short, so please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But apparently, many metalheads often find classical music to be quite fun and entertaining. Music that is often associated with noise and yelling, and the latter being represented with tranquility and blissfulness, can be enjoyed by the same individual? Doesn't that seem counterintuitive? Now, I'm going to get a bit tangential here, but what I had mentioned earlier is important for one to understand art. Let's go back in time. I would say the 16th century, where Galileo went to the church and told them that they were wrong in believing that the earth was in the center of the solar system. In fact, the sun is in the center. He provided evidence for this very claim, but sadly, he was made fun of and even killed by the church. Later on, people like Dalton emerged and proposed his own theory of atoms being indivisible spheres, only for it to be disproved and thrown away once the discovery of electrons had been made. Science and rationality work in a way where one thing is right, but the other is just wrong. Dalton was wrong, but Rutherford was right. Rutherford became wrong, and now Niels Bohr is right. You see, things that oppose one another in science, which are at odds with each other, can never seem to exist with one another. One of these perspectives has to be destroyed and removed once substantial evidence has been found for that opposing perspective. The idea that one can exist but the other can't is what Nietzsche terms as reactive forces. In art, it's a completely different territory altogether. You can have a movie, a poem, or a painting which depicts love to be the idea of emancipation for human suffering. But you can have other pieces of work that show the exact opposite on how it devours an individual's personality, acts as a form of obsession, soon leading to the individual to be in a state of dreadfulness. Yet no individual can say that one piece of work is right and the other is wrong, even in the seemingly contradictory messages. Individuals can enjoy both forms of work. This is what Nietzsche describes as active forces. But this is also, at least in my opinion, what art is. It's the most beautiful part about it. There are no facts in art, there are only interpretations. So, now leading back to my previous point on how many people say this whole idea that metal music and classical music, how the hell can you listen to both? That makes no sense. How can you enjoy both of them? It's just art, man. You can enjoy things that just don't make sense altogether. You can enjoy things that contradict with each other, you know? It's not science. Art is art, rationality is rationality. That's what separates both of them. Now, enough of this tangential nonsense of talking about what art is. I'm sorry about that. But let's again go back to the impact that Bach had upon me. There were numerous times where I was not able to match to the benchmarks required for me to attain certain objectives, for me to get closer to my own dreams. The whole concept that I must be in this way in order for me to get what I want made me always feel fearful for who I am. The idea of failing was something I had a huge disdain towards because then I cannot be the person I envisioned myself to be. But sooner or later I did fail, a fall from grace. All my friends left me, and it felt like no one believed in me. It was in this point that I started to reflect and look back. And that's when I realized the reasons why I was doing all this effort wasn't because I wanted to become some great entrepreneur or a great pianist. No. The reason why I was doing all these things was because I loved the idea of innovation, creativity, understanding new angles to solve problems. Somewhere down the line, I had forgotten the that fun of just doing these things, you know? It had just become something to do in order to become something else. Whether that something else really made me happy or not was never really something I took into consideration. This was why Bach played a huge role in my life. That very day when I listened to Bach's Mass in B minor, it was the very point in my life where I felt like everything was falling apart. But it made me realize that I need to again understand that the reasons I'm doing these things is because these things that I'm doing is what brings me happiness. And that's why you see these two composers, as I've mentioned earlier, Beethoven and Bach, played a huge role in my life. As I have mentioned, Beethoven was a composer that helped me realize that I just need to be myself, you know, that myself is always there with me, and that is the person that understands me the most. And that's what made me understand the whole concept of integrity. And Bach helped me push this idea of integrity further by saying the idea that the things that a man associates himself with is not in order for him to attain higher objectives, but is because those are the things that he finds happiness in. And he should just continue on that. Sometimes failure is a very important part of life because it gives you a chance to step aside from all this competition, a chance for reflection, if I may say. When you're constantly making progress, sooner or later you'll forget why you're doing it to begin with. In the name of competition and survival, the consciousness of will of the man is lost. Yet when failed, you can pick yourself up and tread in the direction in which you feel is right. Sometimes we need to lose everything in order to do anything. Sometimes failure is the key for freedom. Bach made me romanticize with the idea of failure, not running away from it, but embracing it. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Idiot, and I hope that was a good time that you had. See you again next time, and thank you.